Welcome to Specific Love. In our last video, I worked on the Bandsaw reindeer and had so much fun making that I wanted to continue with that tool, so today we're going to work on the Bandsaw scoop. Now I'm going to make the first scoop out of some Douglas fir that I had left over from a previous project, and if this works out, we'll see if we can expand upon it. Now if you look at this 4x4, you'll notice that one of the corners is messed up just a little bit, but that's okay, we're going to cut around that. Now I'm first going to use the miter saw to square up this edge because we want to make sure this is as close to 90 degrees as possible. Now it's time to figure out the size of the scoop that we want, and you can make it any size you want. So I think I'm going to go with about 5 inches. It's now time to draw out exactly how we want the scoop to look, but again we got to avoid this little area. Now I measured in about 1/4 inch on each side and made some marks, and we're going to draw a straight line down this and kind of base everything off of it. In the process of drawing these lines, I realized that the outside of this is not exactly square, but I don't think it'll be a problem at the finished product, so let's work with it. Now to get a nice curve in these corners, I'm going to use a 2-inch washer, and I'm just going to line it up right on the edge of those lines there, and just draw it out. Now to get this outside edge round, it looks like the inside of this washer is just going to work perfectly. If by chance you don't have anything like this, that's okay. You can hand sketch this and just eyeball it to about 1/4 inch. I'm over here trying to make sure these lines are perfect, but I gotta keep in mind that I'm gonna be freehanding this on the bandsaw, so there's a good chance I'm not gonna follow it just perfectly. Plus, I'm gonna go back and sand this down to get rid of a lot of those imperfections. Now, due to the size of the block, I'm gonna have to use my large 14-inch bandsaw for this. Now, if you don't have a large bandsaw, that's okay. You can probably get away with one of the benchtop versions if you scale this down. And I'm gonna be using a 1/4 inch 6 TPI blade. I'm going to try cutting out these outside edges first so I have a little bit more wood to hold on to, and then we'll work on the inside. Now that we have the inside cut out, I'm going to slide this back until we have about 1 inch left in between the two pieces, because now we want to glue the outside back onto the inside. So it's a good idea to make a mark on each side so in a gluing process we don't put too much glue and we don't get this out of alignment. Also, in the process of cutting this, I might have cut this a little bit on the thin side, but we're going to still try and make it work. Also, before I glue it, I'm going to touch up the inside with just a little bit of sandpaper, otherwise later it might be really hard to get to. Now I'm going to use a damp cloth to try and get out some of this excess glue. While I was waiting for that first one to dry, I decided to try something a little bit different. So I cut up some 2x6s and decided I wanted to have a really wide scoop. So I've clamped 2 of them together, roughly 5 inches, same size as the first one, and we're going to cut this out. Also, I decided to cut out 3 more and glue them. In this case, it's going to have really tall sides, but still be about the same thickness as the first one. Now that we've given this some time to dry, I want to cut a curve here in the front just to make it look a little bit better. And you can do that with just a big roll of tape. In this case, it might be a little bit on the shallow side. I have a larger roll here, and I think that'll look great. So once you have it in position, we're going to trace that out. That curve came out pretty nice. It does need a little bit of sanding, but overall looks great. Now I want to start working on the handle. But to do that, well, there's a little lip here on both sides from our previous cut when we glued it back together. And I'd love to have this sitting flat on the bandsaw when I do the cuts. Unfortunately, with those lips, this is not going to sit even. So we're going to take this over to the belt sander and smooth that out first. Next, we want to start sketching out the handle, and you can freehand this if you'd like, but we need to keep a couple things in mind. We don't want this too thick so it doesn't fit our hand nicely, but we don't want it too thin where it'll break off. Also, in the process of cutting out this handle, it'd be nice if we could cut off this edge so it can be one nice flowing piece. But we have to keep in mind that we only have about 1 inch of play up here. So wherever we draw this, we don't want to go more than about 1/2 inch into this lip. Otherwise, it could make it too weak. Before we make the next cut, I'm going to take the pieces we just cut and actually put them back in place and use some clear tape to hold them into position. And that way you have a little bit more control pushing it through the bandsaw and it's not trying to do this number on you while you're making that cut. Now, even though we've taped the sides back on, you can tell there's still a little bit of movement. You can always take some craft sticks and tape those into position, and that should keep it a lot more stable. Now, just like we curved it here on the sides, I'm curving it here so on the bottom, it'll have a good bit of strength and still be nice and contoured. And then on the back here, I put almost like a little foot so to keep your hand from slipping off as you use it. And with that last cut, your bandsaw scoop is nearly complete. All we need to do is take some sandpaper, go over all the sharp edges because we want to minimize anybody getting cut by it or getting splinters from it, and just make sure everything looks a little bit nicer in some of the little rough areas. But overall, it looks great. Now, another option might be to sharpen this edge a little bit up with some sandpaper, smooth it all down, but I wouldn't go too thin, otherwise it could possibly crack on you. But overall, that looks awesome. Now let's jump back to those 2x6s that we glued up earlier. Now in both of these cases, we have a little bit of wood overlap, and that's because it slid a little bit as we were trying to glue everything up. So I'm going to take this over to the table saw and just take a minimal amount of wood off of each side to make sure it's nice and square. And here is the finished scoop for the wider mouth version. And I actually forgot to have the little tab back here on the back, but that seems not to be much of a problem and still get a nice good firm grip, and it seems like it would work very well. Here's the one with the taller sides, and it came out nicely as well. Now I did notice one thing as I was trying to just play around with these. The alignment with your hand, since the scoop is sitting way lower, it doesn't seem like you would have the right control. It just doesn't feel right in my hand. But this other version and the first one I showed you here, both of these, because the alignment of where the actual scoop is, both of these feel really good in the hand and feel like you'd have plenty of control. Overall, this right here is a great project to try out, especially if you're trying to improve some of your techniques or learn new techniques like I am on the bandsaw. This is a project you should definitely try out, and you can use them for, things around the house, or some people like maybe using for coffee beans or scooping dog food or whatever you think would be cool to have some extra little scoops around. Now, this right here would also make great gifts or just some extra craft things that you can sell and make a little extra money. Overall, I hope you enjoyed this project.